All right, welcome everybody. We've got some people trickling in, so we'll kind of give it another minute and then we'll get started. All right, well, in the interest of time, I think we'll kick things off, and if people join as we go, that's totally fine as well. So my name is Amelia Wilt. I am the Partnerships Coordinator with the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust, and this is our Nearby Nature Network webinar series. So thank you all for joining us today. We like to use this series to share knowledge about different aspects of conservation and the work that we do. And today we're excited to feature one of our partners, Casey Trees. And so Spenser is going to be presenting, and I'll hand it off to him to introduce himself and take it away.
All right, thanks so much. Good morning, everyone, and thanks to the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust for having me. My name is Spenser Balog. I'm the Stewardship Manager with Casey Trees. I've been with Casey Trees for about 7.5 years, and in that time, I've seen firsthand that it truly is our partnerships with communities, other environmental organizations, and various district agencies that really make our work possible. I'm excited to share a bit of what we do as an organization, highlight the various ways that you can introduce nature near you, and to do that with tree stewardship in mind. So before I jump in, I want to introduce Casey Trees for those that are unfamiliar with who we are and what we do. We started as a tree planting organization in 2002, and since then we've planted over 60,000 trees across DC, Maryland, and Virginia. We are the DC State Nursery, and we grow all of our trees at our farm in Berryville, Virginia, which is about 700 acres on the Shenandoah River. In the past several years, we've expanded on our mission and became an accredited land trust with the Land Trust Alliance, now holding over 10 conservation properties, both in fee simple and in conservation easements. For fee simple, just means that land that we own and manage ourselves. We're projected to grow a lot this year, and most recently, we're working on a partnership project with the city to purchase about 12.5 acres of urban forest in Southeast DC in Ward 7. So a little bit about our programs. Our public-facing programs are pretty diverse. We have an amazing education team who goes into schools to lead tree plantings, lessons, and we also host camps at our headquarters, which include field trips to the Arboretum and nearby parks. My department, specifically the Policy and Land Conservation Department, advocates for stronger tree protection laws, advocates for sustainable development, and the permanent preservation of green space for community benefit. We have our incredible tree operations department as well, who are out every single day planting, pruning, and watering trees. We deliver native gardens, which help to manage stormwater and also assist with pollinator species. So generally, everything we do as an organization is with the purpose of embedding trees within the fabric of our everyday lives. Nearby nature provides numerous health benefits. It improves our air quality, improves mental health, it reduces ambient air temperature, and serves as living infrastructure. So what we do is all about providing a landscape that we want to live in, where nature isn't separate from where we live, recreate, and work. Okay, so the structure of the webinar is all about stewardship, but generally, what is it? The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA for short, defines environmental stewardship as the responsible management and protection of the natural environment through conservation and sustainable practices. All this is to enhance ecosystem resilience and human well-being, with an emphasis on accountability for our actions and prioritizing long-term sustainability. This is us at one of our cleanup events, removing invasive species, and being able to partner with both the community and local businesses to do so. Stewardship in practice involves a lot of active land management. We can support healthy habitats by providing the necessary conditions for insects and birds, considering that 80% of all trees are pollinated by insects. They facilitate nutrient cycling, soil aeration, and natural pest control. Healthy habitats also regulate global temperature, provide essential ecosystem services like clean air and water, and build natural resilience against disasters. We can enhance tree canopy through planting, but also through ongoing care and maintenance to ensure good form and their survival as a whole. Climate change is putting a lot of risk at our urban trees who go through a lot of additional stressors. So we can enhance that urban tree canopy through planting, but also through the ongoing care and maintenance to ensure their survival. We can reduce threats to these resources through intervention, such as eradicating non-native invasive species and discouraging unsustainable development. Something as simple as removing trash from our nearby parks and green spaces falls under the general umbrella of stewardship. As far as environmental stewardship goes, I'm going to start with one of the most basic actions, which is just to leave things where they are. I grew up with a lawn dad who spent a lot of time reseeding and installing zoysia grass plugs and keeping leaves off the lawn through what seemed like endless raking and leaf blowing in the fall. But letting leaves decompose supports beneficial insects. Bees, butterflies, and fireflies all use leaf litter to overwinter. And although landscape can appear to look dead, like in this second photo, there's a lot of life waiting underneath, ready to thrive again in warmer weather. So just leaving the leaf litter to decompose helps to aerate the soil, helps to put nutrients back into the soil, and in the spring, looking at what's left and starting over if need be. So we're probably all familiar with the neighborly competition for the greenest yard, with the perfect mow lines and the use of chemicals to suppress weeds that do come up. There is a historical significance to this, which dates back to the 17th century, with aristocrats who had so much land that it was a status symbol to dedicate large patches of that land to ornamental, non-edible grass instead of agriculture. European colonizers, both English and French, introduced grass to North America. And before the invention of the lawnmower, one would either have to have paid labor to take care of it, or prior to that, slave labor. Turf grass is essentially the equivalent to concrete in terms of its ecological value, and requires immense resources to maintain, and the relatively short root networks in turf grass don't retain stormwater well. So a lot of the rain that does hit these lawns is more prone to runoff, and then requires a lot of significant energy, both through gasoline, electricity, and chemical pollutants and toxins to maintain for any weeds that do come up. In comparison, pollinator lawns or native lawns with pollinators have deep root systems that allow plants to access underground water in the summer without the need for irrigation. The root structures break up soil compaction and allows water to percolate and be stored deep underground, which also helps landscapes resist erosion. I did my grad school in Madison, Wisconsin. Go Badgers. And the prairie in the summer is truly teeming with life. It's one of the most beautiful things I had been able to see there. And so these pollinator habitats are designed for seasonal rhythm as well, which means that pollen and nectar sources are available from spring to the end of summer and sustains insects well into the fall. So with different plants, early nectar sources support those emerging pollinators, and then mid-season perennials provide those food sources during hot summer months where food and nectar can be hard to find. And then those late season flowers sustain insects well into the fall. And it looks better under streetscape. So healthy habitats support the conditions that trees need to thrive, but there are a number of specific actions you can take to directly support tree stewardship. Tree stewardship in particular involves nurturing and protecting the urban tree canopy through advocacy, sustainable development, and the intentional intervention of invasive species. This might be something that everyone's familiar with, where developers clear-cut swaths of large, healthy forests to support new development. Generally, it's a cost-cutting measure for developers, but there is a body of evidence that shows mature trees increase home values, and any newly planted trees under the ideal conditions will take decades to become what they once were. So in recent years, from personal experiences with friends who have ring cameras and hearing testimonies from community members, there is an emphasis on preserving sight lines and needing nature to be orderly, which kind of leads to raising existing vegetation and starting from scratch. So a lot of this area was once forest, clearing it, subdividing it, putting small trees in, doesn't mean that every one of those trees is going to survive. because there are just so many conditions that lead to the survival of a tree, and the species selection also goes a long way at providing tree canopy. In comparison, I think a lot of us on the call potentially grew up with streets similar to this, or knew people with this degree of tree canopy. And this represents the difference between incremental development and sudden intensification. So increasing housing density doesn't necessarily require landscape destruction, but it is a direct consequence usually of layout and distribution. So instead of adaptive reuse on empty parking lots, degraded soil, areas that are already primed for development, um, forests are often clear cut and trees are sparsely peppered in later. And preserving mature trees doesn't often happen during development when the building goes from lot line to lot line and takes up the entire building envelope of that area. Another threat to tree canopy, another major threat, is the spread of invasive species, particularly constricting vines like English ivy. English ivy climbs trunks, it reduces the available light for trees to photosynthesize, and it weighs down the canopy, which makes trees more susceptible to damage during storms. So all of that weight in the canopy level um, leads to breakage of branches, which allows pests to infiltrate and really threatens tree canopy on a broad scale and requires a lot of intervention to remove all of that English ivy as a whole. So as part of tree stewardship, there are several ways to manage invasive species. So for English ivy, cutting windows in the vines, like the one on the left, it stars off nutrients in the upper canopy level and kills upper growth to reduce the weight above. I've seen this happen through a lot of experience. There were trunks from English ivy about 4 inches thick at a friend's house, and it took about a year, but they're all dying now, which is really exciting to see that a lot of those trees will have the availability to receive more light, more nutrients, and have the opportunity to survive. Um, that management of invasive species also involves monitoring for new sprouts and hand pulling or cutting back plants like this tree of heaven along a sidewalk crack. It's important to monitor any cleared areas for resurgence. Anytime you disturb the soil, invasive species can reseed. And so you can also replace that invasive understory by planting native seeds that spread on their own. Plants like ferns spread through spores, which are pretty easy to keep reseeding. And native species like this golden groundsel on the right, or pacra, are aggressive enough to outcompete most weeds and spread vigorously, but generally aren't mean about it. As a bonus, native ground cover is less water intensive and also helps to fight off pests. So I'm going to go over some of the methods that we use to restore the urban tree canopy, and all of these can be replicated in some way, shape, or form. It includes natural regeneration, a traditional tree planting, and a mixed method of both, which I'll explain in some of the later slides. So assisted natural regeneration is a broad term. It's the ongoing intervention of existing forests that show signs of regeneration. So forests that have a seed bank that is naturally putting out new trees. Um, it's done by protecting seedlings that pop up throughout the year, or even caging them if necessary to prevent deer browse. Large populations of deer nibble on the new growth and can kill or starve off the ability for trees to thrive. The key thing about assisted natural regeneration is that it's highly site specific. So what's meant to be in one forest may not be suited for another area due to soil, light, topography, or the existing species that are there in the seed bank. To support assisted natural regeneration, it's imperative to target invasive species that do pop up, to provide saplings with the best available resources and give them the space to establish themselves. So that method is that targeted eradication. If you do see an invasive species, clear it away, and those trees can have that opportunity to thrive. So what does it look like in practice? This is a project that we are partnered with really regularly. It's an example from Langdon Park in Ward 5, which is a Department of Parks and Recreation site that has a pool, it has a rec center, it's got baseball diamonds and a lot of active recreation, but it's surrounded by 4 distinct forest patches. About 6 years ago, a group of neighbors started recording and flagging emerging trees that popped up. They've done a lot of advocacy since then, and gotten significant grant funding through the Department of Energy and Environment to do this ongoing support. So the stakes you see on the left are research plots, and this is where invasive species were repeatedly removed. And that photo on the left is from March 2023. The one on the right is from July 2025. So just in 2 years, there's been a massive regrowth of trees in that area just from simply removing invasive species and letting native trees seed, take root, and thrive with the available soil space that comes up. Sometimes this is done in a Miyawaki method where you're planting trees in really small clusters, but it also can just be done by letting things regenerate naturally. So generally, planting is the fastest way to introduce tree canopy, which provides immediate shade and aesthetic benefits to the landscape. The caveat is that not all trees planted survive, as I mentioned before, and that trees in the urban setting have a particularly tough time with polluted runoff, salt from the winter, extreme heat, and poor soil conditions. There's a lot of compaction, which reduces the availability for water to permeate into the soil. And trees planted also require the proper timing to ensure survival and resist transplant shock. This year, there were a lot of funky different weather situations that happened where it was warm and then cold and then warm again. And some of the trees that we had ready for planting died before we even got them in the ground, just given that the conditions are constantly changing. Um, Generally, a tree that has a 1.5 inch to 3 inch caliper, which is the diameter of the trunk, is preferred, which equates to around 10 to 15 feet in height. These trees are better suited to settle into the ground, resist transplant shock, and have a better chance at thriving. These are some of the kids at one of the school tree plantings, just going for it with one of the pickaxes. And it's been an amazing opportunity to get to watch those trees thrive over time and allow for that environmental education. The one consideration with tree planting in comparison to assisted natural regeneration is that tree planting is often water and labor intensive and can be expensive versus just having trees regenerate naturally, but not all sites are suited for ANR. So some of the ongoing maintenance, newly planted trees require a lot of ongoing maintenance to ensure their survival. Young trees that are planted in the last 1 to 3 years require about 25 gallons of water a week, which is around 1.5 inches of rain to establish strong roots. Days like today are really hot. We're currently in a drought in the DC area, so they need a lot of water to be able to thrive. Well-timed pruning also helps to prevent fungal disease and decay from spreading to other parts of the tree. Pruning also leads to better airflow within the tree and allows more light to be let in, also triggering growth hormones for new branches to grow, new sprouts to grow off of those branches, and generally just ensuring a better form for the tree to be growing tall, strong, and healthy. Another key component for ongoing maintenance is mulch. Mulch acts as a protective blanket for the trees that reduces water evaporation in hot summer months. It keeps the soil cooler. And then in the summer or in the winter, it also keeps the soil a bit warmer. It's crucial in the summer during hot, dry summer weather like we've been having, as it insulates those roots against the temperature changes, but it also blocks competing weeds and protects the bark from mower damage and also weed whacker damage. Some things to consider, even with that maintenance, are things like this. Improper methods like overwatering, especially at the trunk of the tree, could lead to root rot, also lead to trunk rot. Trees don't absorb water through their trunks. They mainly serve as a structural support for the tree and a channel to transport nutrients. Watering trees at the drip line, which is the perimeter directly beneath the outermost tips of the branches, is the most effective way to irrigate. This is where the tree's primary feeder roots stretch out to absorb soil, moisture, and oxygen. For pruning, you'll often see bad pruning cuts where the tree isn't able to heal. The angle of pruning matters to protect both the branch collar and the bark ridge. The branch collar is crucial because it contains a tree's natural chemical defense zone. The tissue in the zone generates callus wood that seals the wound. It prevents internal decay. And when it's cut flat, that wound can't heal and can introduce a lot of pests that damage the tree and could lead to death of the tree itself. Um, and then on the right is volcano mulching. When mulch is piled really high in a cone shape, right up against the trunk of a tree, we call it a volcano. It's bad because it traps moisture right up against the trunk and leads to rot and other diseases, and could send out a lot of feeder roots, which are more susceptible to um, stress for the tree as well. So you want to be able to see the root flare when you are putting mulch around the tree and create more of a donut shape around the tree. So generally, donuts are good, volcanoes are bad. No offense to volcanoes. And then I'll go over this last method pretty quickly. But it is a really interesting way that we started reforesting some larger areas. It's called applied nucleation. So instead of tree planting in a typical row or just letting trees pop up where they do naturally, applied nucleation establishes small scattered clusters of trees rather than planting an entire deforested area all at once. So generally, the nuclei of these trees create microclimates that attract pollinators and seed dispersers like birds and mammals, which allows the forest to then expand naturally. So this in practice, we've partnered with the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission and the Prince George's Department of Parks and Recreation to plant more than 10,000 native trees at a former golf course just next to Bowie in Maryland. And this is going to convert neglected fairways into a completely rewilded park. So we've established a lot of these clusters throughout the park as a way to seed out, and we're already seeing a lot of success, a lot of wildlife, and we've created these protected zones for those trees to thrive. So one last aspect of stewardship that I want to be able to touch on um, is land conservation itself. So simply put, land is running out to plant trees. The climate's getting hotter. Trees that once thrived in the zone that we're in are having a harder time establishing and thriving in this heat. Um, we recognize that development does need to happen to support a growing population. It does also threaten urban tree canopy when done unsustainably, and corridors of intact forest for wildlife to pass through are being fragmented. So we've done a lot of work with different groups, Capital Nature, things like that, to be looking at blue and green resilience corridors. So rivers throughout DC and into the watershed of the Chesapeake Bay, the Anacostia watershed, also tracing different patches of forests, being able to connect those different patches together. Um, and disturbed edges, when things are developed, introduce a lot of invasive species, which require more intensified maintenance. Green spaces are really important for communities to recreate, to heal, and to experience nature nearby. What we do as an organization and as a land trust are to provide accessible green spaces through pocket parks, forest patches, and food forests. So these are three of our conservation properties, and each offers a really different experience for the communities they're embedded in. The first was a donated property from the Department of Housing and Community Development. In 2018, when we really launched our land trust operations, we were given four district properties to steward over the long term. That's the first and second photo. The first is on Sheriff Road in Deanwood in Ward 7, and it's about a quarter acre along a bus route and provides accessible shade for people that are at the bus and provides habitat. There have been foxes, there are birds, there have been raccoons, and really offers a lot of ambient air temperature reduction. So those pocket parks can be anywhere from 700 square feet to 5,000 square feet or even 10,000 square feet. Generally, it's just embedding these within the neighborhood fabric rather than having parks elsewhere that you have to drive to. The second is a forest patch. We call them forest patches because they have a designated center and identified edges. We've done a lot of work with UMBC, the University of Maryland in Baltimore County, and the U.S. Forest Service, who've done research on forest patches that have natural regeneration opportunities. So we call this property Hellbender Hill. There used to be a brewery nearby that has since closed, but we still call it Hellbender Hill to be affectionate for the brewery that was there and all the support that we got from them. And we provided, this used to be a runoff channel straight through the center, but we've since been able to provide walking paths that allow for slowing water down, just letting it have these sort of check dams to prevent erosion, but also allow safer access for people to go from the bus down to other transit lines and the metro. We lead ongoing invasive removal events. We're doing one this Friday on Juneteenth where we're going to be removing Japanese knotweed, bush honeysuckle, porcelain berry, and English ivy. So there are a number of invasive species in that lot, but it has seen a lot of regeneration and has looked a lot better than it was when we first received it. And then the last way that we provide that accessible green space are through food forests. As a tree planting organization, we're able to provide a variety of trees, and a lot of trees are uniquely suited for this area. So, this is a spot next to Rock Creek Cemetery, called Allison Street. Most of our properties are named after the streets that they're on, which isn't exactly unique, but is their easiest way to remember them. And it's been an amazing way to see how the community is using a spot like this. It's only 700 square feet. It's the corner of a lot. But there are cherries, there are plums, there are figs, apples, peaches, and pawpaws. And the community regularly makes jams, pies, and I've even seen people walk by and just take some fruit off the tree for a quick snack when walking through the neighborhood. A few years ago, we were partnering with the Hellbender Brewing Company to make a partnership beer with about 12 pounds of service berries that we picked as an organization. We were going to incorporate some of these sour cherries, but when we went back a week later, they were all gone. And we thought that birds had gotten them, that it was just too hot, but it turned out the neighbors were all climbing and utilizing all the cherries here. And they've been able to really take care of this property, and we hope to be able to provide more opportunities like this into the future. So I finished up a bit sooner than I had anticipated, but I would love to open it up for questions to be able to have some more targeted discussion on some of these things that we talked about. And if there are things that don't get answered today, you could reach me at sbalog@caseytrees.org, and then also find some of our other programs at caseytrees.org/land-conservation.
Thank you, Spencer. That was great. It looks like we've got a couple of questions in the Q&A if you want to review those. And if you don't have access, I can read them out.
Yeah, I can try to open up the full window, but it might also help to go through some of those. Here, I can try to open some up. Do we do school education activities in Virginia, Prince William County? Is the first question. So first, we have been doing work around Berryville, Virginia, where we have our farm. We've led a lot of farm trips for schools there in Charles County. We have worked in Fairfax as well, but I think this is something new that we're venturing into. Traditionally, Casey Trees was really only operating in Washington, D.C., or within the boundaries of D.C. But we've since started to expand into Northern Virginia, starting to expand into Prince George's County. We were donated a conservation opportunity or donated a property in Riverdale, Maryland, where it was completely covered in bamboo. And we cleared that site, have planted over 50 trees, and that offers a really amazing flex space for school activities, but also for neighborhood gathering. We just did a grand opening. But our education activities specifically are all on our website, and I can provide some additional resources if you reach out to me and connect you with the right people from our education team to explore some of those additional activities. Um, Looks like Cindy was unable to see the slideshow, but I think it'll be provided later, and could send it to you as well if you were interested. Dan also asked if there were links to research and data that can be shared to support the benefit of keeping trees and removing invasives. Um, I can go through and find some of those resources and send to you. On the Langdon patch where they're doing the invasive removal throughout the summer, I went through and did a very sciencey quadrat data sampling method to show how removing invasive species over the long term is supporting natural regeneration. So I did different research plots going and doing a sampling method to count the percent area that each plot took up of various species. And I'll be doing a post-project sampling to see the rate of regeneration. But there are a lot of benefits for keeping trees over just starting over. Just given the root networks, the soil, having a native seed bank. A seed bank is really important for that natural regeneration. But we've seen just over and over again in most of our properties that removing invasives supports natural regeneration, but it also has the immediate benefit of opening a lot of light for soil resource for things to come in. Bush honeysuckle takes up a lot of biomass. And so when we do invasive removal events, hacking back some of these bush honeysuckle plants, you have an immediate benefit of just being able to see how much space was removed. You have to monitor for resprouts, but all of that light just allows for trees to regrow. Um, and then another question about the tree branch cut. So kind of pruning at an angle, but just outside of that branch collar. You can prune flush, but it just allows to have that pruning cut heal. So I can send some additional photos once I send you that data. Or if you want to reach out to me, I can send some data on the tree preservation and invasive removal. But it's generally not quite 45-degree angle, but is not just straight up and down right up against the bark, but just allowing for the branch collar and the yeah, for the branch to be able to heal. Whether they're a food forest in Northern Virginia, I'm not sure. Again, we are just starting to expand a lot of our work into Northern Virginia. But this is something that we're hoping to incorporate more of. There's a lot of ways to incorporate canopy trees and fruiting trees in the same plots, the same patches. And so trees like fig trees, grow really well in this climate, being sort of a Mediterranean climate. And so we try to incorporate fruit trees when possible, but we'd love to be able to do more food forests in Northern Virginia and partner with other organizations that are doing land conservation, like Northern Virginia Conservation Trust. Um, Another question is about native species we grow and how we select them. We often select trees that will be resilient to heat, trees that are kind of cultivars of existing trees. So within oaks, we plant a lot of different kinds of oaks, overcup oak, swamp white oak, red oak. So we're trying to, when we do planting, have a method of a certain percentage of genus, species, and family. So we're not creating homogeneous tree canopy. So all that biodiversity, allowing for a more rich, I think, tree canopy as a whole. But we work with various nurseries throughout the country to do bare root, and then we grow them in Berryville, Virginia. And we do a lot of partnership with Bartlett Tree Co. as well, who does research on pests, does research on stress, does research on the conditions needed for trees to thrive. We grow a lot of loblollies right now. We're trying to incorporate a lot more loblolly pines. Um, we plant just a variety of trees. I think there's a list of all the trees we plant on our website that you'd be able to find. But generally a lot of different oaks, some maple, um, and sweet gum is another really big one that we plant. Ginkgo. So there's a variety of native trees, but we typically select them just based on a right tree, right place mentality. If we can support large mature tree canopy, we want to plant them a canopy tree. Um, and we try to select trees that are good for that soil condition. So if there's one that is typically wetter, we'll plant a river birch, or maybe we'll plant a bald cypress. Um, and then if there's a spot that's a bit drier, maybe we plant something like a loblolly pine that can withstand a little bit drier conditions. But that's generally how we select them. But yes, can definitely share contact info with the school division point of contact to start a discussion. We're continuing to expand our education program, and we will be working in more schools. We do these nature near school programs where we go in and do supplementary classes to teach students about trees, the ways that they grow, and then we kind of compound on that during our camps and during our school tree plantings to provide a direct link to the kids to be able to see trees grow over time. For tree planting, or sorry, for tree watering, when we're watering with buckets and carrying when hoses aren't an option, how important it is to do the watering in one time period versus more spread out, importance of dumping the water into tree bags or just dropping within the root zone. We were part of a tree planting recently at a school, and buckets of water are heavy. But we tried to put a few gallons in at a time just to do that initial watering in to allow the roots to kind of spread out, to allow the water to get into the ground and just allow for the tree to experience less of that transplant shock. And then throughout the week, it's just making sure it gets that water throughout the week when it's planted in the ground. But I would say generally when you have a newly planted tree, it's every other day or maybe 3 days a week that you are watering that tree. But tree bags we've seen work really well. We provide tree bags when we do tree plantings. We plant a lot of street trees as well. As a DC State Nursery, we partner a lot with the Department of Transportation, who is the host of the Urban Forestry Division in DC. So we plant a lot of trees in the public right of way, and those require just a lot more ongoing watering than trees that are planted in maybe an open field or trees that are planted near other soil resources. And so it's important when planting a tree just to plant right away or to water right away and then water ongoing throughout the week. But generally, when trees become a little bit more established, you can and water less frequently. Can trees be purchased from Casey Trees? We don't, as far as I know, sell trees. We provide free tree planting if you live within DC. So you can go on our website and request free trees, and we'll have one of our foremen come out and do a consult, go over the property and review what the right tree is for the right place. There is also some degree of selection for what type of tree that you'd be looking for. We love to put service berries in to provide a fruiting option that's a medium stature tree or red buds. We also love to put oaks in. We love to put sweet gum in. We love to put river birch in. So there's other ways that we try to incorporate those into our native gardens as well. We do garden projects where we do yeah, stormwater retention, and we do a rebate program. But that may also be for DC specifically, where you plant your own tree and you can request a rebate. And then we do fee for service. So if you want us to go out and be planting trees on your property, we offer that service as well. But that generally is at cost rather than a free option for DC that's supported through a grant for the Department of Energy and Environment. Um, this is about hardiness zones and changing. Have we expanded our species of trees to match the zone change or too early in the game to go that route? I think we have, as a whole, been expanding our species to match, or at least the cultivars that we are offering. Um, some trees just really are experiencing more stress than they used to, or certain pests. Like we used to plant more elms, but elms with Dutch elm disease are experiencing a lot more stress. Right now, I don't believe we grow any beeches, but beech leaf disease is also increasing, and so we're trying to monitor that. I think it's been spotted in Rock Creek Park. So I think it is difficult to be thinking of the types of species that we're growing, but I think um, we are expanding our species list as a whole to be thinking of that. So that's done through research at our farm with Bartlett, and that's also being done in our tree operations with our foreman and our crew. And so I can connect you to some folks in that department as well if you'd like to ask more tree specific questions. As what we do is a little bit more land conservation and ongoing stewardship focused. But definitely not too early in the game to go that route as the climate is changing pretty quickly. Ron is asking why 1.5 to 3 inch caliper trees are preferable. Um, this is really to reduce the transplant shock. Trees above that um, require a lot more root, or not require, but they often experience a lot more root loss. And so smaller trees, I think, are often preferred. So if you can do 1 inch, as you said, those have a much easier time taking. But when we're planting in projects, when we're planting throughout the city, it's trying to expand and enhance canopy at a faster rate. And so I know you said that excavating and ball and burlap removes a big portion of the root shed, as you mentioned. We grow in root bag in ground, so we don't ball and burlap anymore. I think we did for a while, but all of our trees are done grown in ground in root bags now. Um, and so yeah, I mean, if you can plant a smaller tree and have the time to allow it to grow, that's great. It's going to have a much easier time taking and acclimating to its new home. Rachel's asking about volunteer opportunities. We do ongoing invasive species removals during the year. And so we also partner with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, who does these invasive removals also to do a lot of ivy clipping. The ones that we are doing around Langdon Park that I showed with the assisted natural regeneration are going to be going on all throughout the summer into the fall. And so it's a really cool way to introduce yourself to the work that we're doing, to learn about forest patches, to see the direct impact of this type of intervention, and to, um, yeah, get your hands dirty, which is really exciting. We also do have tree planting events throughout the spring and the fall. They tend to fill up relatively quickly. So I think those are ones that are pretty popular, but we do offer tree planting opportunities. In the past, we've also offered advocacy courses. I think on our website, there still are some advocacy resources. Advocacy is really big in what we do. we recently saw the passage of a new amended tree canopy law. In 2002, we established the Tree Canopy Amendment or Tree Canopy Preservation Act, and that introduced the idea of special trees. So you needed a permit to remove trees. Later in 2016, we established the class of heritage trees. So trees that are over 100 inches in circumference couldn't legally be removed in DC. And then we recently had that amended again so that the special trees that used to be 44 inches to 99 inches are now 40 inches, which protect over 20,000 trees, I believe. So an additional 20,000 trees are protected just by reducing the requirement by 4 inches in circumference, which is really huge. So there are a lot of ongoing volunteer opportunities. If you'd like to sign up on Friday, we're going to have some people. I'll be there cleaning up one of our forest patches, and there'll be bagels, there'll be coffee. So join us. Julie's asking about a Japanese cedar tree. I love cedars, probably my favorite tree. And a nice flowering dogwood. Going to be replanting the entire space with native shrubs and perennials. Better leaving the Japanese cedar or removing it and planting native. We plant a mix of native and cultivated trees. So just because a tree isn't necessarily native doesn't mean that it's invasive. I love an eastern red cedar or a juniper. Japanese cedars are beautiful. They still have benefit, and sometimes introducing a tree that's suited to another zone or another country can um, root better here. And so Japanese Zelkova is a tree that is often planted as a substitute for elm, given that it's less susceptible to Dutch elm disease, but has a similar form, has a similar leaf shape. And so I think leaving the Japanese cedar would be great. If you have to remove it, there are other options, but I think typically preserving canopy is often what we recommend. So Diana asked again, are the food forest plants, trees all native? Um, yes and no. The For the most part, yes. So pawpaws are a native tree to the Appalachian area. If no one's had them, they're sort of a mix between a mango and a banana. They're not everyone's cup of tea, but they're really amazing. So we plant a lot of those. Service berries are also native. But sometimes even in that site, there's some Asian plums that are planted. I don't believe that we planted them, but we typically, whenever we do food forest, try to introduce as many native plants as possible. Crab apples as well. So generally, yes, for fruit trees, we keep them native. For canopy trees, we introduce a mix of native and cultivated trees. Um, Someone mentioned an office overlooking 395 and some highway triangles with mature trees covered in invasives. Um, Asking about resources toward protecting existing mature trees. It's hard because in the highway, it all often comes down to the highway administration. There's a lot of ownership issues, even in DC. You can have National Park Service, you could have Department of Parks and Recreation, you could have the Department of Housing and Community Development, you could have Authority, you could have a private landowner all on one street. And often it's hard to know who owns it. There are resources and a series of maps to find out who owns that property and being able to reach out. So I encourage you to advocate to your local council members, to advocate to your local government, to reach out directly to any surrounding arborists in DC. We're unique because we have ward arborists for each 8 ward. And there are multiple arborists per ward that have their zones. And so they're in control of several thousand trees in that area. And so I'm not exactly sure how that structure exists in Northern Virginia in general, but I think in the highway, yeah, I mean, that's a tricky thing. Even at Hellbender that we're going to be at on Friday, it's next to a railroad. So that wind tunnel unfortunately creates the perfect environment for seeds to be picked up in that wind tunnel and dropped in any available green space. And so they tend to just keep seeding into the site, which needs a lot of ongoing maintenance. Hopefully, by introducing more resilient spreading native ground cover, we could suppress a lot of those invasives. But in areas like highways, you'll often see a lot of tree of heaven because they like a lot of degraded soil and they're not picky with where they're going to grow. David is asking about open lands and planting trees at schools and teaching kids how to take care of them and educating on their value. Um, we don't have a pruning program. We used to have more of a pruning core that were using MOUs with district parks to be able to prune street trees, like an adopt a tree program as well. I don't know where the status of the adopt a tree program lives currently. But with trees on schools, there is a lot of that ongoing stewardship for kids to be learning about the importance of preservation, the importance of taking care of a tree. And so we do events throughout the summer. We just did one at Langdon Park with some kids to come out and remove ivy from trees using hand pruners. And so it is incorporated in a lot of the lessons that we teach as well. But that's all within our education program. Gene's asking whether we prune trees for a fee in Arlington. We don't currently. Um, Generally, we do ongoing pruning of trees that we've planted, but we don't really go into homes to prune trees. There are a lot of groups that we support that do. One of our previous staffers started the um, Accokeek tree, and does pruning, tree removal, tree care as a whole. And so, um, we don't do tree pruning generally in Arlington, no. Um, there is a question about connected to WSSI in Virginia and Pennsylvania. As far as I know, no. But I think that's something that we can certainly look into. There's a lot of groups that we're hoping to continue getting involved with. We have partnerships with WABA, the Washington Bike Association. Um, and so we do wetlands. We there are a couple of wetlands groups that we're partnered with. I think we may be partnered with WSSI in some way, shape, or form, but we don't do too much with them in Virginia and Pennsylvania. Um, but we do sometimes around DC, especially around advocacy. Um, I don't know if it's pushing the envelope to plant live oak. We haven't done too much research on live oak just yet, but I think we are continuing to look at um, additional tree species that we could potentially be um, incorporating in our offerings as a whole. Um, And Diane again said the nonprofit Plant Nova Natives might be able to assist for the 395 area issue, which is great. I think it's really important to lean on these partnerships where one organization might do something really well and another organization might do something really well. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel too much. And so with Chesapeake Climate Action Network, we were able to provide a subaward agreement where we do invasive removal, but it's not the core of what we do. And so it's really cool to be able to partner on those events and support the ongoing work at parks like Langdon, where they're able to do the assistance with leading these events, dividing and conquering, where you might have competing events on multiple days. Um, but generally, the goal is to have more of this um, sort of forest stewardship network, so similar to like a Weed Warrior program. Weed Warrior is a program around Montgomery, Prince George's. There is a Weed Warrior program in DC where volunteers go out and do ongoing invasive removal from trees in National Park Service area in Rock Creek. in park service parks, Department of Parks and Recreation parks. And you get trained in the methods for safely removing invasive species, and then doing ongoing invasives on your own. I think it's really important to sort of adopt these areas to do that ongoing support, um, rather than relying on one-off events to be able to do that. So if you see an area near you that you're curious about, reach out to the owner of that space or reach out to the jurisdiction that might have the authority to give you better answers as to how to take care of it. Um, but yeah, Fairfax has the Weed Warriors as invasive management area. But we're now calling them forest stewards in a lot of spots in DC. Um, and yeah, just being able to do that on the weekends. It's a nature fit, eco fit kind of a thing. It is a workout. It's very tiring, but invasives do take a lot of effort, a lot of time to manage and make sure that they're not returning too frequently or too aggressively to allow for trees to thrive and to regenerate in a good way. So I don't see any other questions right now. If you do have any other ones that pop up, please do reach out. I'd love to touch base on providing any additional resources that I do have, to guide your own projects that you're doing in your backyard, whether that's deciding what trees to plant, whether that's trying to figure out how to restore certain areas, or whether that's just advocating for better tree laws, or education opportunities. My email again is sbalog@kctrees.org, and I believe this presentation should be listed online after. But really appreciate the opportunity to come in today and to talk about what we do and all the different ways that you can consider nature near you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Spencer. Your presentation was very informative, and clearly we had a really engaged audience since we got to get through a lot of great questions, which was perfect. Um, I will share out the recording of this webinar. It'll be posted on our website, but I'll send out the link to everybody who signed up, and I'll CC Spencer on that email as well so that everybody has his contact information. And I'll link to the Casey Trees website with upcoming events like the Friday, Juneteenth event that Spencer mentioned. So you can find
Sounds
ways to get
great.
involved and reach out to Spencer and I if you have questions about local groups in Northern Virginia or other connections or follow-ups. But yeah, again, thank you so much, Spencer, and it was a pleasure having you today. And thank you for everybody for joining. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their week.
Thanks, everybody.